It is a paradox that has baffled economists and intelligence analysts for decades. We look at the satellite images of the Korean peninsula at night, and we see a stark, almost poetic contrast. To the south, a blaze of light, a sprawling web of electricity that signifies one of the world's most advanced digital economies. To the north, a black void, a silence, a country that appears to have fallen off the edge of the modern world. We are told that North Korea is a hermit kingdom, isolated, starving, and technologically backward, stuck in a cold wartime loop where the internet is a rumor and industry is powered by coal and muscle. We are told that their GDP is negligible, somewhere between $29 and $40 billion, a fraction of what a single American tech giant makes in a quarter. Yet, despite this crushing poverty and total isolation, this same dark void manages to finance a nuclear ballistic missile program that rivals the superpowers. They launch satellites, they test intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the American mainland, and they maintain a standing army of over 1 million soldiers. The math simply does not add up. A country with an economy smaller than the state of Vermont should not be able to threaten the global order. So where's the money coming from? The answer lies in a report that was quietly circulated among United Nations Security Council members and later leaked to the press. It details a reality that overturns everything we thought we knew about the Hermit Kingdom. The report tracked 58 distinct electronic attacks attributed to North Korean operatives between 2017 and 2023. The estimated revenue from these attacks was $3 billion. That number alone is staggering. $3 billion is not just profit. In the context of North Korea, it is survival. It is the hard currency that buys the centrifuges, the rocket fuel, and the luxury goods that keep the Pyongyang elite loyal to the Kim dynasty. But if you think $3 billion is a lot, the data coming out of 2025 and early 2026 paints a far more terrifying picture. The game has evolved. The $3 billion figure is now ancient history. According to the latest intelligence assessments from South Korean and American cybersecurity firms, North Korean cybercriminal activities generated nearly $2 billion in the year 2025 alone. This includes a single record-breaking heist in February 2025, targeting the Bybit cryptocurrency exchange, where operatives walked away with an estimated $1.5 billion in digital assets. To put this in perspective, that single theft is roughly equivalent to 5% of the entire nation's estimated GDP. Imagine if a group of hackers in the United States stole $1.4 trillion in a single afternoon. That is the scale of what we are dealing with. We are not looking at a rogue state anymore. We are looking at the world's most successful criminal enterprise, which just happens to have a flag and a seat at the United Nations. But this capability did not appear overnight. The image of the North Korean hacker, a genius sitting in a dark room in Pyongyang, is the end result of a 30-year strategic plan. To understand how they became the kings of the cyber underworld, we have to go back to a time before Bitcoin, before the internet was a weapon, and look at the physical origins of their criminal empire. We have to look at the era of the supernote. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, the Kim regime faced a crisis. The Soviet Union had collapsed, and with it, the subsidies that had kept the North Korean economy afloat. Facing famine and economic collapse, the regime needed hard currency, and they needed it fast. They couldn't trade legally with the world, so they decided to print their own money. But they didn't print North Korean won, which was worthless. They printed United States dollars. This operation was centralized under a shadowy organization within the Workers' Party of Korea known as Office 39 or Room 39. Located inside the heavily guarded party headquarters in Pyongyang, Office 39 was tasked with a single mission: generate foreign currency for the leader's personal slush fund. They engaged in drug trafficking, selling methamphetamine and heroin through diplomatic pouches. They sold counterfeit cigarettes and pharmaceuticals. But their masterpiece was the $100 bill. Throughout the 1990s and 2000s, the U.S. Secret Service began to detect a new strain of counterfeit bills circulating in the global economy. They started appearing in Manila, then in Peru, then in Las Vegas. These were not the usual cheap forgeries made on laser printers. These were perfect. They were printed on the exact same cotton linen blend paper that the U.S. Bureau of Engraving and Printing used, a paper that is technically illegal to possess or manufacture without a license. They used the same color-shifting ink that turned from green to black when tilted. They were printed using intaglio presses, massive industrial machines that weigh tons and exert thousands of pounds of pressure to create the raised texture of a real bill. These machines are strictly controlled and sold only to governments. The bills were so deceptive that they passed through the sophisticated detection machines at the Federal Reserve. They became known as the Supernotes. For 20 years, North Korea effectively taxed the U.S. economy by printing its currency. It was a brilliant, low-tech hack of the global financial system. But as the 21st century progressed, the physical world became a liability. The United States redesigned the $100 bill, adding complex 3D security ribbons and microprinting that were much harder to replicate. Law enforcement agencies cracked down on the smuggling networks that moved the cash. Carrying suitcases full of fake bills across borders became too risky. The profit margins were shrinking. The regime in Pyongyang, now under the leadership of a young and tech-savvy Kim Jong-un, looked at the changing world and realized that the future of crime was not in paper but in data. They realized that they didn't need to physically print money if they could just trick the world's bank computers into giving it to them. And unlike a physical printing press, a cyber weapon could be deployed instantly, anywhere in the world, without ever leaving the safety of Pyongyang. This pivot was not a sudden decision. It was the harvest of seeds planted decades earlier. In the 1990s, while the country was suffering from a devastating famine, the government made a crucial decision to invest heavily in computer science education. It seemed absurd at the time, a starving nation buying computers, but the leadership viewed it as modern warfare. They scoured the country's primary schools for children who showed exceptional aptitude in mathematics and logic. These children, often as young as 10 or 11, were removed from their families and placed in specialized institutions like the Kumsong Middle School. In these schools, the curriculum was brutal and singular. There was no room for literature or history or art. The students spent up to 16 hours a day learning calculus, algorithm design, and coding languages. They were treated like Olympic athletes, given the best food and living conditions in a country where starvation was common. The most promising graduates from these feeder schools were then funneled into the nation's elite universities, primarily Kim Il-sung University and the Kim Chek University of Technology. But the education didn't stop at the borders. Recognizing that their own knowledge base was limited, the regime sent their best students abroad. They went to China, particularly to universities in Shenyang and Harbin, and even to Russia and India. There, they absorbed the latest developments in Western software architecture, networking protocols, and encryption standards. They didn't just learn how to build software, they learned how to break it. By the time these students returned to Pyongyang in their early 20s, they were world-class hackers, fluent in multiple coding languages, and deeply indoctrinated in the belief that their keyboard was a weapon of war against American imperialism. They were inducted into the General Bureau of Reconnaissance, specifically into the notorious Unit 121, the elite cyber warfare division of the military. The world remained largely oblivious to this growing army of cyber soldiers until 2014. That was the year North Korea decided to introduce itself to the world stage, not with a missile, but with a hack. The target was Sony Pictures. The motivation was petty, a Hollywood comedy film called The Interview that depicted the assassination of Kim Jong-un. The regime viewed this not as satire, but as an act of war and a direct insult to the supreme dignity of the leader. They demanded the movie be pulled. When Sony refused, the hackers of Unit 121 struck. They didn't just steal data, they annihilated the company's digital infrastructure. They deployed a wiper virus that erased hard drives, turning thousands of computers into useless bricks. They leaked unreleased movies, humiliated executives by publishing their private emails, and released the personal data of tens of thousands of employees. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare. The Sony hack was a wake-up call, but many in the West dismissed it as an act of vandalism, a digital temper tantrum. They failed to see the bigger picture. North Korea wasn't just breaking things, they were testing their capabilities. They were learning how to navigate Western networks, how to bypass firewalls, and how to persist inside a system for months without detection. The Sony hack was the graduation project. The real work, the work of generating revenue, was about to begin. And the target shifted from a movie studio to the global banking system. The ambition was no longer to embarrass a CEO, but to pull off the greatest bank heist in human history. In early 2015, North Korean operatives set their sights on the Central Bank of Bangladesh. This was a calculated choice. They knew that the central bank of a developing nation would likely have weaker security protocols than the Federal Reserve or the Bank of England, yet it still had billions of dollars in foreign reserves sitting in accounts in New York. The hackers didn't storm the bank with guns. They sent an email. It was a simple phishing attack, likely a job application or a resume sent to a bank employee. One click was all it took. The malware infected the bank's internal network and gave the hackers a backdoor. But they didn't steal the money immediately. This is the hallmark of the North Korean strategy: patience. They sat inside the Bangladesh bank's system for nearly a year. They watched. They learned. They monitored the daily workflow of the bank employees. They learned specifically how the SWIFT system worked, the global messaging network that banks use to transfer money to each other. They needed to understand the syntax of the transfer requests, the approval codes, the timing of the shifts. They even compromised the physical printers that the bank used to print out daily transfer logs, writing software that would delete the fraudulent transaction records from the print queue so that the bank officials wouldn't see the money leaving the account until it was too late. It was a level of sophistication that rivaled the best intelligence agencies in the world. On a Friday in February 2016, they made their move. They chose a Friday because the weekend in Bangladesh begins on Friday, meaning the bank headquarters in Dhaka would be empty. It was also a holiday weekend in China, where the money was being routed, and it would soon be the weekend in New York, where the Federal Reserve is located. They created a perfect blind spot in the global financial calendar. The hackers sent a series of 35 fraudulent instructions to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, pretending to be the Bangladesh Bank, ordering the transfer of nearly $1 billion to various accounts in Sri Lanka and the Philippines. The plan was perfect. The codes were correct. The authentication was valid. The Federal Reserve computers began processing the transfers. They managed to move $81 million to a bank in the Philippines before the scheme unraveled. And it didn't unravel because of a high-tech firewall or a brilliant cyber defense agent. It unraveled because of a typo. In one of the transfer requests, the hackers attempted to send money to a non-profit organization they had set up. But instead of spelling the word foundation, they typed fandation. This spelling error triggered a manual review by a routing bank, Deutsche Bank. The clerk saw the error, flagged the transaction, and the Federal Reserve stopped the remaining transfers. They had aimed for $1 billion and walked away with $81 million. It was a partial failure, but it proved a terrifying point. A group of hackers in a country with sporadic electricity had almost drained the national reserves of a sovereign nation. The $81 million that did get through vanished into the casinos of Manila. The hackers knew that casinos are the black holes of the financial system. Once money is converted into chips and played at the baccarat tables, it becomes virtually untraceable. This operation, later attributed to the Lazarus Group, the name given to North Korea's primary hacking collective, changed the threat landscape forever. It showed that the regime viewed the global financial system not as a participant, but as a prey. It was the first time in history that a state actor had used cyber warfare to steal money directly from another state's bank account. Following the Bangladesh heist, the Lazarus Group didn't slow down. They diversified. In 2017, the world witnessed the WannaCry ransomware attack. This was a different beast entirely. It wasn't a stealthy theft. It was a digital smash and grab. The virus exploited a vulnerability in the Microsoft Windows operating system, locking up hundreds of thousands of computers in over 150 countries. Hospitals in the UK had to turn away patients because their systems were frozen. Railways in Germany, telecommunications in Spain, shipping giants like FedEx, all were brought to their knees. The screen displayed a simple message. Your files are encrypted. Pay us $300 in Bitcoin to get them back. While the attack generated a relatively modest amount of money compared to the bank heists, it served a dual purpose. It caused chaos in the West, and it signaled North Korea's full entry into the world of cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency is the perfect tool for a pariah state. It operates outside the traditional banking system. It doesn't require swift codes or correspondent banks. It is borderless, and with the right tools, it can be anonymous. For a country under the heaviest economic sanctions in human history, crypto was a miracle. The regime realized they didn't need to trick the Federal Reserve. They just needed to hack the crypto exchanges, which were often run by startups with lax security. They began targeting exchanges in South Korea, Japan, and Southeast Asia. They used spear phishing emails to target employees, deployed malicious trading apps, and exploited vulnerabilities in the smart contracts that govern decentralized finance, or DeFi, platforms. This new frontier exploded in profitability. In 2022, they hacked the Ronin network, a sidechain for the popular game Axie Infinity, stealing over $600 million. In 2023, they hit the Atomic Wallet users for over $100 million. And as previously noted, the culmination of these efforts was the colossal breach of Bybit in early 2025. But stealing the crypto is only half the battle. You have to launder it. You can't just spend $1 billion in stolen Bitcoin. This is where the North Korean operations show their true sophistication. They utilize a technique known as chain hopping, moving funds rapidly between different blockchains, from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Avalanche, to confuse trackers. They use mixers like Tornado Cash, which act like digital blenders, mixing the stolen funds with legitimate traffic to obscure their origin. However, the most insidious development in North Korea's economic warfare strategy is not a hack at all. It is an infiltration. As we moved into 2024 and 2025, security researchers began to uncover a massive, sprawling scheme that involved thousands of North Korean IT workers. These were not the elite hackers of Unit 1 and 21, but a separate army of software developers, graphic designers, and project managers. These workers are dispatched to countries with better internet infrastructure, like China, Russia, or increasingly, nations in Southeast Asia like Laos and Cambodia. They set up laptop farms in cramped apartments, working around the clock. Their mission is to get hired by Western technology companies. They create fake profiles on freelance platforms like Upwork, Freelancer, and LinkedIn. They steal the identities of real American or South Korean citizens. They use sophisticated VPNs and remote desktop software to make it appear as if they are logging in from San Francisco or Austin or London. They interview well, often using cheat sheets or even having a face actor sit in front of the camera while the real developer types the answers. And they are good. They get the jobs. They are hired as remote blockchain developers, full-stack engineers, and IT support staff at Fortune 500 companies, cutting-edge AI startups, and even aerospace firms. Once hired, they do the work. They write the code. They attend the Zoom meetings, often with cameras off or heavily filtered, and they collect the paycheck. A salary of $150,000 a year is standard for a US developer, but for the North Korean regime, it is a fortune. The worker keeps a tiny fraction for survival, and the rest, up to 90%, is remitted directly back to Pyongyang. We are talking about thousands of workers sending back hundreds of millions of dollars annually in pure, clean salary money. But the threat goes beyond the money. These workers have inside access to corporate networks. They have administrative privileges. They are the ultimate insider threat. There have been documented cases where a North Korean worker, hired as a developer, used their access to create backdoors for the Lazarus hackers to come in and empty the company OS accounts later. It is a symbiotic relationship between fraud and theft. In late 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed indictments revealing that this scheme had infiltrated over 300 U.S. companies, including major television networks, Silicon Valley giants, and defense contractors. Amazon, in a leaked internal memo from 2025, reported blocking thousands of suspicious applications that were traced back to North Korean clusters. This is the new face of espionage. It is not a spy in a trench coat. It is the quiet remote worker fixing your cloud server who is actually sending his paycheck to fund a nuclear warhead. The evolution from the supernote to the superhack represents one of the most successful strategic pivots in modern statecraft. It demonstrates a terrifying resilience and adaptability. When the world cut off their trade, they smuggled. When the world cracked down on smuggling, they counterfeited. When the world redesigned the currency, they hacked the banks. And when the banks tightened security, they pivoted to crypto and remote work fraud. It is a game of cat and mouse where the mouse is armed with nuclear weapons and some of the best coders on the planet. We must understand that for North Korea, this is not a side hustle. It is the central pillar of their national defense strategy. The billions of dollars generated by these activities, the estimated $2 billion in 2025 alone, bypasses every sanction the United Nations has ever written. It renders the blockade ineffective. That money pays for the imported components in the Hwasong-18 ICBM. It pays for the fuel for the mobile missile launchers. It pays for the expensive cognac and Mercedes limousines that Kim Jong-un gifts to his generals to prevent a coup. In a very real sense, the Western world is funding its own destruction. Every time a Western company pays a ransom to decrypt their data, every time a crypto exchange is drained, every time a remote salary is paid to a fake persona, that money flows directly into the barrel of a gun pointed at Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington. This reality challenges the traditional definition of a state. Political scientists often debate whether North Korea is a failing state or a successful one, but perhaps the most accurate description is that North Korea is a mafia state. It functions less like a country and more like a global organized crime syndicate that happens to hold territory. Office 39 is the boardroom, Unit 121 is the enforcement arm, and the diplomatic corps are the fixers. They have erased the line between government policy and criminal activity. In most countries, crime is a corruption of the system. In North Korea, crime is the system. As we look toward the future, the threat is only accelerating. With the rise of artificial intelligence, the capabilities of North Korean hackers are multiplying. They are already using large language models to write more convincing phishing emails, to generate deepfake voices for fraudulent wire transfers, and to automate the coding of malware. The barrier to entry for cybercrime is lowering, and the efficiency of the North Korean machine is increasing. The IT worker scheme is likely to expand into more sensitive sectors, moving from tech startups to critical infrastructure providers. The story of North Korea's hidden economy is a stark reminder that we live in a world where geography matters less and less. The heavily mined demilitarized zone that separates North and South Korea can stop a tank, and it can stop a soldier, but it cannot stop a packet of data. The walls we have built to contain the Kim regime are physical, but the threat is digital. We are trying to fight a 21st century enemy with 20th century tools. Until the international community finds a way to effectively police the digital commons and shut down the financial pipelines of the crypto underworld, the Hermit Kingdom will continue to rob the world blind. They will continue to turn our own technological dependency against us, proving that you don't need a strong economy to be a superpower. You just need to know how to steal one. This is the reality of the Econ Empire of North Korea. It is an empire built not on production, but on predation. It is a parasitic economy that feeds on the openness of the West. And as long as the internet remains open, the dark void on the map will continue to reach out and take what it needs, one bite at a time. The $3 billion of the past was just the tuition fee. The real cost is yet to come. Thanks for reading Econ Empires. To stay ahead of the global flow of money and power, make sure to follow our analysis as we continue to deconstruct the hidden mechanisms of the world economy. We don't just follow the headlines, we follow the money.